See you. It's great to have you with us. My name's Kieran Howells. I am the head of commercial content at Marketing Beat and Retail Gazette. Hopefully some names that you know. And of course, today we are talking about unlocking the power of brand milestones. So what do we actually mean when we say that? Well, a brand milestone is essentially a really pivotal, a pivotal moment that's happened in your company. So every brand has a key story to tell. These are the moments that define that brand. It's a launch, it's a pivot, it's a rebrand, it's a breakthrough project, it's a shift in mission, a key success that you basically should be shouting about. They offer intrigue, they offer personality, they offer authenticity, but in a lot of cases, they're kind of getting squandered. Maybe we're not shouting about them enough. Maybe we're not truly utilizing them to help our brand building and our story building. And this is exactly what we're going to get into today. We have two incredible guests with me today, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what the power behind milestones, what they really mean, what they can do for you. And so to kick us off, basically, I think it would be really great to hear from both of my guests on who they are and what they do. And then we'll dive into some questions. So maybe, Hugh, you don't mind kicking us off and telling us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Kieran. And yeah, good to see you all. So my name's Hugh. I'm the global brand lead at DAZN. So DAZN, for those who don't know, it's actually spelled DAZN. You may have seen it floating around the UK, but it's a global sports brand, essentially broadcasting multitude of sports with a range of products all over the world. Like we're 200 plus markets now. So trying to build a name for ourselves. I think the name Netflix for sport is being bandied about a bit, but lots of ambition as a brand and lots of milestones we can talk into today. So yeah, lovely to meet you all.
Fantastic. Great to see you. Thanks for being with us. And Dan, over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan. I am the senior editorial strategist at Frontify. My background is both in journalism and in agencies, helping big global brands tell their stories. Frontify is obviously a big global brand, and I came in-house here about 4 or 5 months ago to help tell the story of the brand, really, and introduce the brand to the world. We're very well known in Europe and the UK, and trying to make headway in the US more and more. And that is a big part of that is about storytelling, about making sure that people know who we are and our stories heard. So that's what I'm tasked with, and I'm super excited to be here today to help everybody else understand how we go about talking about milestones and how we can help with that as well.
Perfect. Excellent. It's going to be a really, really strong conversation. So a few of the pillars that we're going to build on before we dive in with the question then. So we are going to get to the bottom of today. Firstly, what brand milestones really are, why they're worth shouting about, how to spot them early. We're going to talk about turning key moments into multi-channel stories that your audience cannot miss. We're going to talk about keeping your voice and assets consistent across every milestone and moment. And finally, smart ways that you can repurpose milestone content so it works harder for you, so it does more for you. So this is something that I have heard Frontify talk quite a lot about previously. And so I was wondering, Dan, to kick us off, why milestones? Why are they something that's really important? Why are they something that we should be utilizing?
A milestone just helps define who you are as a brand in the moment. Okay, so you're growing your story, you're introducing yourself to audiences, maybe you're reintroducing yourself to audiences, and milestones are great ways, chapters along your narrative to signpost who you are and what you're doing and keep the audience up to speed. It's also a moment of real excitement. It's often so you're not talking about what you had for lunch, you're talking about a product launch, you're talking about a rebrand, a refresh. And these are things that hopefully you're authentically excited about, that are authentic milestones. These aren't yardstones, right? This isn't a small step. These are milestones. So really important to get those right and to keep people up to date. And you know, I'm sure your competitors are doing the same. So having a real grasp on this is very important.
Mm-hmm. And Hugh, tell me about your kind of initial utilization of brand milestones. I mean, what do they mean to you and to DAZN?
Yeah, so I can speak very much from a design lens, and I've worked in sports broadcasting across a few countries and product companies, so I can kind of speak to that general description of a milestone. Sometimes we use the term tentpole moments. I know we were talking about Kieran previously, but yeah, milestones. I think fortunately working in the sports industry, maybe I'm maybe a bit biased, but it's quite laid out your milestones. So you are dictated by the sporting fixtures. So season launch, you might have some big derbies, for example, El Clasico in La Liga, grand final in Aussie rules, if anyone knows what that is. So it's very much kind of dictated by these kind of big tentpole moments. So those milestones are there, but I think as a brand, you very much want to look beyond that too. And whilst you can tick those boxes and those, I guess, big key milestones, you want to dig underneath a bit more and understand where potentially there are some other opportunities to dive into from a brand perspective. But generally, that's kind of my world. It's quite fixed, but you're always kind of, especially from a brand, and I should have touched on it earlier as well, you're kind of competing against more broadcasters. You're competing against rights holders as well. So, for example, the Premier League, you're making a splash, they're making a splash. So sometimes you do get drowned out. So I think it's being also, I think to Dan's point, you're kind of being selective, you're being authentic, but also picking some opportunities that sometimes no one else is going to look under that rock within inside, and maybe having a go there. We can get into that a bit later on, but yeah, it's quite unique in the sports industry, but I'd imagine with FMCG products, etc., it's sometimes it's quite different. So the sport is quite fixed, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think you raise a really good point. And this is something we kind of discussed previously, which is who you are as a brand means that what your milestones are going to be may vary drastically. So in your world, it's very interesting to hear that actually it could be that some fundamental sport event is happening. That is a milestone for you. The fact that you're involved, the fact that you're celebrating with your audience is a milestone. Not just necessarily what's happening inside the company. Like, for example, I know that, again, as we previously discussed, NHL is now something that is under DAZN, which is, you know, a really fundamental deal for the UK, especially long-suffering fools like myself who happen to love the NHL. And so, yeah, so you're saying actually realizing what a milestone means for you means not only looking internally, but actually being there to celebrate with your audience, being there for those really important moments throughout the calendar that are defined for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's you're kind of led by the calendar to a degree, but to your point, yeah, the NHL rights have just been announced on DAZN. So that's NHL TV, and that's a global deal outside of the US and Canada. But that's yeah, like I said earlier, it's fixated, it's locked. Work in the broadcast industry, it's very fluid, so you'll have a deal dropped quite quickly. So you've got to adjust your I guess if you've got some milestones planned from a brand, I guess if it's an opportunity, if it's I guess a brand moment, you want to lean into like a season launch of a new sport that's dropped in the calendar, you've got to be really agile and pivot to those two. We constantly have different rights. Sometimes we lose rights, so you've got to again pivot towards that. So I'd kind of argue that it is a bit, we have a trickier landscape versus say a rights holder. So a Premier League, I use that for example, but their season is usually pretty locked. Those games are going to be played unless there's some major event or something. For us, we've got to have, I guess, in our toolkit, I guess from a resource aspect internally with our teams, how do we sometimes get up and go really quickly on a brand, I guess, milestone, which lands in our lap a few days earlier. So yeah, we've got to be super. It's a crazy business at times.
Maybe Dan, you could help us out here, because I know what our audience are gonna. It's really useful to hear Hugh's perspective here and understand what a milestone means for him. But maybe you could tell us, for our audience who may be wondering, well, what are my milestones? Maybe you could kind of tell us from your experience what people could be looking out for there.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there are advantages to the business, the industry DAZN is in. You know, sport is highly, you know, engaged audiences. It's huge global platforms and networks, and you know, not every industry has that. Not every brand has that sort of built-in excitement, those built-in narratives almost to where, you know, when DAZN show NHL, people know those teams already. They know the players. They probably know the rules of the game, right? So it's almost the playbook doesn't exactly translate one-to-one across to another brand, but you can use that same framework of thinking about the next year as a season, right? As a storytelling opportunity. So over the next year, you're going to look at, right, what have we got coming up? And you know this, you know what your product launches are, you know the markets you're going to expand into over the next year, and seeing those as a season of television. These are the episodes you're going to build up to, and you're going to have a season finale, and it's going to be super exciting. And by the time you get there, your entire audience will know how exciting it is. The whole team will be on board helping post about this on LinkedIn, and you know, whether that's the big product launch, whether that's the IPO, or you know, maybe a smaller thing like a follower count milestone, or you know, something, whatever it is for your brand that makes sense. The lessons from DAZN or from any, you know, sort of big brand doing this can translate across. If you apply those sort of storytelling frameworks of, you know, thinking about not just setting out a product roadmap, but a story roadmap.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea. That's really interesting and a great way to kind of look at the year and divide it up and work out what you're going to shout about. The big question I have though is, are brands not currently utilizing these kind of key milestone or tentpole moments like they should? And if so, what does utilizing them properly look like? How should they help you shape your narrative?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time people can think about, or people are thinking about milestones or tentpole moments, as you said, as an opportunity for a press release, right? You make a statement and you move on. It's not feeding into a grander narrative. It's not consistent with the rest of the messaging you're putting out. You know, we interrupt this broadcast to let you know we've got 3,000 followers. Like, who cares, right? When it is part of your overall storytelling strategy, when it is something that feels consistent with the brand that you are building, when you you know, have your whole team, maybe you've got a centralized asset or a set of assets that they can all post and they're helping tell the story as well. You're getting your fans involved because the milestone is actually valuable for them as well. It's not, you know, a lot of the time milestones feel like a press release because it's just something that's important to the brand. But if you're talking to your audience, your fans, your followers, you know, the people that really buy into what you're doing, those milestones should mean something to them. So now they're excited. They're excited that the product has launched, the pair of shoes that they've been waiting for, the new piece of tech, whatever it is. And so they help you amplify that milestone. So yeah, I think, you know, I bang this drum all the time. You'll hear me bang it another 15 times today, but it's about, you know, how you are telling stories, you know, what is your strategy there? And is the milestone communication consistent with that?
Fantastic. And Hugh, from your experience, what does that look like on the ground? How have you done it? How have you utilized them?
Yeah, and even throughout my career, I've been in lots of those conversations that Dan alluded to. It's kind of like, okay, we've got a 10-year anniversary or what have you. So you can take that feedback on, but I think that you've got to be true to yourself. And I think Dan mentioned storytelling. My buzzword, you probably use pub test quite a bit. I think you just want to make sure that it passes the pub test with a cafe test. But I think it's more, if you're being authentic enough to your audience, you're kind of going to cut through at the right time, at the right moment, without overdoing it. So if you've got 1,000 messages or milestones throughout the year, it just becomes, just overkill. So I think for us at DAZN, we are blessed, I think, in a way that you have those big moments, and you'd be silly not to jump on that wave. So, for example, we have the Club World Cup in the summer. That was obviously a huge milestone for us. Global free rights to the biggest club competition ever. So you've got to lean into that. But I think it's also being deliberate and pushing back on and saying no sometimes to those opportunities that are low hanging fruit. Because sometimes you might do a detriment to your own brand, because it's, again, consumers are smart. They'll be like, they're not really that's not something for me, it's something for them. So we've got to be authentic. We've got to have something that's going to cut through, make their 10 or a few seconds when they're engaging with us, make that a better experience, but also kind of provide a bit of a solution for them to go, design something that can enhance my experience somehow. So yeah, I think it's being brave to say no sometimes.
I love that as well. That's really interesting. And you're completely right that with an audience in all forms, as our audience will know only too well, you have seconds to engage them, don't you? You have seconds to justify the why. And I guess, as Dan says, a drop in the ocean is not going to achieve anything, but actually building a narrative that people understand and understand where this milestone fits into it is what helps broaden your brand and deepen it and help people engage with it, rather than just throwing more stuff into the ether, which we see way too much, don't we? And so I'm wondering, you shared a great example, Hugh, internally of a really fantastic milestone that you utilized well. I'm wondering, looking back over both of your careers, whether there are any other really good examples of milestones. It could be something that you've done internally. It could just be something that you saw and went, that company is nailing that. They did the perfect job at executing that milestone.
Shall I go first? Yeah. Okay. I'm actually going to keep it on sport. I think my favorite example of something that communicated a milestone but was also a great storytelling opportunity is ESPN's 30 for 30. And sorry, Hugh, to bring up a rival sports network, but 30 for 30 was a series of 30 films made and commissioned by ESPN for their 30th anniversary about moments that have happened during ESPN's lifetime. So these great sporting moments, they got real documentarians, they told these stories. And it's been going now for 15 years. They just keep making new seasons of this because it's outgrown 30 for 30. That's just now the name they use. ESPN's 45 years old. And they've found a way to turn their tenure into a storytelling opportunity that celebrates things that are valuable to the fans and their brand, and it helps them earn those moments and earn that idea of whether it's a particular cup final that was historic, or whatever it was, whatever the example was. I just think that's, rather than posting and saying happy 30th birthday to us, put your money where your mouth is. Think of a way to add value, to make and build a whole new brand out of that storytelling opportunity.
That's quite meta, isn't it, in a way, because it's like they made a milestone out of previous milestones. But I like it. That's a great idea. Hugh, what do you think?
That's a great example. I love 30 for 30. I think one that kind of I always draw back to, it was more than 10 years ago now, but I think looking at, and even before I get into the example, I think when you look at like marketing teams, like we've all kind of been in the rooms where you have like your calendar, your 12 months ahead. How do we kind of look at opportunities? And then also, I think great marketers too will be in an agile kind of environment where they'll go, okay, something's happening right now. How do we jump in? How do we jump into this? And like you touched on, Dan, if you kind of don't do it well, it's not great. Just falls on its face. So I think one example that I really love, I think the creative's great, so I always get lulled by that in music, but is again, sorry, it's kind of sporting-esque type brand. We're kind of on sport, that's my world, so I've got to trip into that. But it was Air Jordan, so sports apparel in the US. I was actually living in New York at the time, so I was fully exposed to this New York TVC kind of like multi-channel campaign. For those who kind of don't know, Derek Jeter, I'm not even a huge baseball guy, to be honest, but I got swept up in this story. He was a famous, really famous baseball player, and he was basically retiring, which is, it happens all the time. But this guy was an ultimate competitor, probably the most superstar of the game. Michael Jordan of baseball is an easy way to explain it. And he was basically retiring. So that was the milestone. He's having his last game ever for the Yankees in a couple of weeks, it was at the time. And what I loved is they kind of said, okay, we've got this great moment. This is Nike, obviously, big budgets, great kind of brand. But they said, let's kind of tap into something that's unique to him and let's really leverage that. So they looked at Jeter, and again, sorry for the sports reference, but basically when you're playing someone in baseball, you're going to throw the ball at them and they're going to hit it. But every time he was hit the ball, he'd tip his cap in a way. It was kind of acknowledging the other player in a way. It's kind of very respectful. And the campaign was called Respect. Basically, this lovely little note of someone noticing he does that, I guess, kickstarted the whole campaign and the milestone moment. So the creative is basically everyone from celebrities to who knows, really, really famous faces tilting their cap in acknowledgement as respect to him. So ladders up to the campaign. It's a great little insight on him. It's a big brand. It's done with big names. There's lots of brand codes. I know the Frontify guys will love that. So it's like Nike. It's everything's littered through basically Yankees as well. It's a great piece, and it really leans into that kind of key. Yeah, a milestone, or retirement. But I think you could imagine that the Nike team really getting ahead of that. Obviously, maybe whenever he announced it and said we're going to do a big thing out of this and doing it really, really well. So I think that's I'd love to do something like DAZN on that.
Mm. That's great because it's so authentic. I mean, it's something that you would realize if you are a true fan of this guy and you really love, the way he plays, and also it says something about his ethos towards the game, doesn't it? So it's so authentic. And I guess that it leads us on to another fundamental point that we discussed previously, which is that milestones are inherently, they have to be authentic, don't they? Because people can sniff out inauthenticity in a heartbeat. So that's a perfect example of something truly authentic that people will see as authentic and only endears them to the brand instead of them feeling like the brand's just kind of jumping on the back of something.
And if I could add as well, it's very delicate. I think sometimes there's such passionate fans too. If you go the wrong path, if you don't do it to the level that they expect, it can fall, again, really hard in a negative way. So you've got to be authentic, but you've got to really lean into this moment. And like all brands, I think to do it well, like we touched on at the start, if you really lean into it, do it well. But I'd imagine with a bit of consultation, working with the fans to make sure it's right, you can knock it out of the park.
Yeah. As Jeter did, apparently.
Yes.
That leads us on to something really interesting, right? So there's some research that actually Frontify did, and it's great. It's really, really interesting research, and it's on this subject. So I want to read you this, and I want both of your takes on this. So the research states that 71% of marketers feel excited whilst working on brand milestones. So that's kind of expected, right? So 71%, they're happy, they're excited. However, what's actually really surprising is that 28% feel really cautious, 14% said they feel anxious, 12% confused, 11% pessimistic, 9% frustrated, and 5% even feel dread talking about brand milestones. And that just seems like the complete opposite of what we've been talking about. However, I'm going to hazard a guess that actually that leads on really nicely from what we were just talking about how delicate those moments are. But anyway, I want both of your takes on that. So maybe Dan, you could kick us off. What does that say about marketing to you?
Yeah, I think it suggests that, marketers, they understand the stakes of what they're playing with. They're making sure, is this the right message to go out with? Is this going to be valuable and important to people? Are we going to look stupid? Will anyone care? I hear that one a lot. It's like, well, will anyone care? And yes, if you truly believe that this message is the right message, that it adds value to your audience, that it's valuable to you to share, it can be. And it all comes back to what that underlying strategy is. The thing that's going to give you that 71% excitement and confidence is knowing that, yes, we've agreed that this is going to be the thing. And Hugh, to a point you just mentioned about almost engaging with the fans beforehand to get their take on it. It's like, bring your audience with you. You don't have to keep the milestone a secret. You can make sure that a year out, say we want to be the #1 brand in, we want to be the Netflix for sport, right? We want to be the #1 brand in, and bring them along. Say, well, we just did it, and that's now, everyone's like, understands why you're excited. I think the context is really important. So for the marketer on the ground, nervous about the message they're going to share, is the more data you can get, the more context you can give, the more strategy you can put in place into that storytelling, the more confident you're going to feel in that message. And a milestone isn't an afterthought, right? So that's why we talk about plan it in advance, and and treat your audience as you would a confidant. Like, let them in on it.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Hugh.
I think I was just looking back at the data as well, because like where do you start? But I think the good thing is, like, 70% of marketers are excited to work on a brand milestone. So I think it's you're starting on a good opportunity there. But yeah, there is, I can definitely admit that throughout my career I've kind of fallen into the lower percentages, because I guess in a way, if you didn't believe what the brand was, I mean, for one, you didn't believe in the brand choosing that milestone, but then there's the execution. There's so many things that can fall wrong. It's a bit of a house of cards. So, but I think generally it's positive. Everyone's kind of wants to attack a milestone, but I think, like we keep mentioning too, it's like, for one, it's kind of choosing the right one. Is it worth putting so much energy into this, or are you kind of just doing it for the sake of doing it? But generally, it's good to see that marketers kind of believe and back themselves there. But then I can empathize with the other guys as well. It really depends on the brand, and I guess sometimes just that senior leadership too, really giving you the endorsement to be selective of milestones versus this is what we have to do. We're going to tick every box here and we're just going to get on with it.
Yeah. So it's almost, actually, that's an interesting take, because it's like, okay, maybe actually being a little bit trepidatious is the right move. You should be kind of, really honing what a milestone truly is to you.
Totally. I think it's a fair one, because I think sometimes if you just all was it an echo chamber or navel gazing, it's very much a case of, we have a great product, we're gonna push it out. So I think that I think the point there is that kind of pessimistic, I think, is a good thing. I think having that challenge of, is this going to work, like Dan touched on earlier, it's like, I think it's, if you're not believing it, like, it's a good thing to challenge that, diplomatically, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Here's a bit of a kind of a leading question, I guess, but I'm interested to hear both of your takes. So, do we believe that a milestone is more powerful as a story in the moment, or as part of a long-term, like, mythology? Do we take those moments and really amplify those individual moments? Say, if there is a cup in a sporting game, is it a standalone celebration, or actually should it always form part of a long-term mythology? What's thoughts on that?
I mean, for me, it's the drum I've been banging the whole time. It is, a milestone is not only a distinct moment, but it's about the milestones that have come before it, an opportunity to re-engage people with those, and to say, if it's our 30th year, here's what happened in our first year, here's what happened in our 10th year, and tell the whole story of, the brand again, with that new context, with that new milestone in mind, and add it to the story as you move forward. So it's not just a snapshot that you then forget about and go back to business as usual. It's part of the story you tell, it's part of the fabric of your brand. So the strategy sort of wins out. The narrative overarching thing is always going to be the most important for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's kind of even like what Dan touched on with the 30 for 30. Like, I mean, you can kind of gravitate towards a milestone and say, hey, we've got some gold dust here. Let's kind of keep this thing going, because it's probably demand to keep it going. I think even from brands, and just speaking from a local brand in Australia, which I just gravitated towards this too before this call. But there's an Australia Day, which is a kind of a national holiday, and a brand that really associated themselves probably 30 plus years ago was with lamb. So it's a very barbecue type of day. Lamb was kind of the meat of choice that they wanted to promote as a brand. And essentially they kind of just really gravitated toward that moment, lent into it, had a lot of fun with it. The tone of voice was great. So it's kind of become an expectation from quite a general day that this brand is really associated with that day, because they've kind of kept it consistent. They've kept the tone of voice really consistent as well. And I was just thinking, one also pitfall potentially for a brand is if you don't lean into a milestone, you've got so much, I guess, association and legacy with. Is these question marks, maybe potentially it's like, is meat not the preferred option? And we kind of stepping away. So there's also a brand can kind of fly really close to a great milestone, but then how do you safely navigate away from that? I was just thinking, but it's just it's a good example. I think that one of picking into a moment and really doing some great work, but keep it consistent so it becomes a bit of an exciting milestone for fans to look forward to.
That's really interesting, because that takes us into kind of, well, let's call it like moonshot territory, right? Like being running such a successful campaign that you are associated with something. And if you're not aiming for that, as you say, Hugh, like you're leaving a lot on the table, aren't you? And it is a moonshot, but then I guess all marketing is really, you're hoping for something sensational to happen, aren't you? So why not give it a go, like, and I guess regardless of what industry you're in, there's always going to be something that you can aim to own, right?
Totally. I think it's that is gold dust for a market. If you can get into that moonshot territory off a creative idea, I mean, you should pat up yourself on the back. It's a first world problem, I think, if you're trying to get off that trajectory. But yeah, it's something that I think if you can craft something and create its own bespoke milestone and connect that with your brand, then you're flying.
Yeah. So, but that again leads us into some more questions that I think delve a bit further into what you were saying there, Hugh. That I guess you could call that a high stakes milestone, right? Like that's what that really represents. It's a high stakes milestone. It's one that is hard to gain, but once you've gained it, as you say, pat yourself on the back because you've done some great work. But the voice with which you execute this is so fundamental, as we've already said. That authenticity piece is super, super important. And as we all know, in a corporate environment, like you're trying to do it for a business, right? And in a corporate environment, it can be very, very, very hard to keep that voice authentic. We were talking before about there's a great guy on LinkedIn, and his whole thing is his kind of like LinkedIn brand, you could say, is that he takes pictures of marketing that he sees on the tube or on a bus or whatever, and he kind of has a fictitious internal conversation, and you can hear where the original idea probably sat before it went through the mangle of the corporate spiel. And then and what happens at the end, the product that you end up with is actually just a disaster compared to what it could have been, which could have been so fantastic. So how do you make sure that you don't secede to corporate speech? How do you keep it authentic? What's the fundamental there?
You go down.
Yeah, happy to jump in on this. I mean, for me, if we're thinking the way to position this sort of communication is as story, right? When you think of these things as content, that's when you fall into the trap of, it doesn't matter what the voice is. It doesn't matter because it's content. It's just filler. But storytelling isn't making statements. It's sharing emotions. And so that's where the authenticity comes in. Because, if you can inject real emotion into a message, it all of a sudden doesn't sound corporate. It doesn't sound bland. It sounds authentic and real. And a press release may be professionally excited. It may use generically excited language, but why not let your team post about the milestone in their own words? and tell the world what it means to them, you know, and you can create a set of approved assets for them to use. So they're all going to be on brand. They've all got this centralized asset that they're posting, but along with it, they're posting a message that actually means something. And, you know, that's one example. And that's a case of, like, you know, I'm talking about obviously social media in this instance, but yeah, I think that's always a good barometer of, like, you know, what's the emotion here? Like, are we being authentic with this story, or is this just this read like a piece of content?
Yeah, I mean, the emotion is, and it's such a, yeah, it's mentioned obviously a lot these days, and it should be. It's probably the most important thing. And I think we've seen some data recently. Mark Ritson, I think System One shared around the fact that, you know, emotion not only drives brand objectives or attributes, but also business attributes. So it is showing that emotion is ticking the box in many ways from, I guess, a lot of different metrics, which is great. And I 100% agree with Dan there. I think in a way is you've got to lead with that, and then obviously you have your functional, you have your sales messages, your product message, they'll come. But I think with kind of, especially a key milestone, if it's so important for the brand, you want to really cut through that emotional layer is important. But doing that, and I think, you know, as a Frontify kind of world is as well, it's kind of using your brand codes correctly. So you've got what distinctiveness, that kind of memorability, and a few others. But I think it's just you want to do that, but you kind of want to do it leading with emotion and kind of not saying too much. I think having the confidence to let your positioning or your whatever your creative platform is to lead the work. So that cuts through, that message cuts through. And this could be a campaign. I know we're talking about milestones, but I think, for an example, like Volvo released a campaign. I think it was last year, I can't recall, but around safety and really, I think, I'm not sure if you recall it, but basically a family of a young child, and then there's basically at the end of the video is a potential risk of that kind of family, and it's quite a really emotional piece of work, and it really shows a brand that's confident in their own kind of positioning, and also having the confidence to put a few of the tools down and as a brand and really let the position cut through. And I think if you could replicate that in a milestone and really let that emotion cut through, but then also with the subtle brand connection, you'll pass that pub test for sure, I think.
Yeah, I think that example is really interesting. I mean, obviously Volvo is a very mature company that's been around, and they can tell a great story and probably have the resources to do that authentically. But I was just thinking of an example that's sort of almost the other end of the spectrum, this startup. I don't know if anyone knows Runner, RUNNA. It's an AI-powered coaching app for runners. It was acquired earlier this year by Strava. Now, Runner's only been around a handful of years, I think, since the pandemic. Didn't really have a hugely mature brand in terms of tone of voice, in terms of, like, you know, updating people on milestones. So when they were acquired, they made an asset. It was a very simple visual. Strava welcomes your runner, something like that. And then the entire team posted it on LinkedIn, and they all did it in their own voice. And, you know, just to go back to what I was saying before, because they knew the best way they could communicate the emotion around these milestones. Like, you know, we did it. We've made this startup, and now we're we've made the big time. We're going to the biggest sporting app in the world. They're going to help grow us even further. We've all been working 25 hours a day. We've been, pulling all-nighters to get this done, and now we've made it. And that, I think, showed a real, great sort of storytelling sense in the fact that they knew that it wasn't a brand moment. It was an employee moment. It was, something for the team to share. And choosing the way you share a milestone, I think, we get something we haven't necessarily touched on as well, but for Volvo, it makes sense to do big TVC, right? To do a campaign film. And in this instance, for this startup, it made sense for the team to be the ones to share that message. And so, yeah, the maturity of your storytelling, the maturity of your brand, the industry you're in, the size of the milestone, all these things will help indicate what kind of platform or way that you should share that message.
And there's an interesting piece in there about trust, isn't there? Because I think sometimes the way that you maybe end up with a great idea that's gone through the mangle, as we talked about, is by not trusting people with that story. And actually, Dan, what you're describing is the opposite. It's actually trusting people to convey that story in a way that really matters to them and how they've been part of it. You're not just, no company is just a name and a logo, it's people. But it does take some trust in your people and probably kind of just letting go a little bit to, that is almost the key to authenticity, I guess.
Yeah, and that's that sort of the flex fixed model. It's like having the flexibility within the fixed brand guidelines to do tell stories in an authentic way. If you are completely inflexible in every department, and I'm talking from design assets to tone of voice to platforms, if you've got a 6-week approval process, for example, because it has to go through so many checks and layers, then yeah, your brand becomes almost too centralized. You can't move fast enough. You can't respond to maybe one of these hidden milestones that pops up, that you see something in the data and you want to post about it, but it doesn't get approved for 6 weeks. So you've missed your opportunity. So yeah, I think trust in having the right people, trust that those people know your brand as well, and that your audience understands who you are because you've been telling your story this well over a period of time. Trust in the story roadmap that you've laid out, so that this milestone is one you want to communicate. So yeah, trust really is a through line, from one end, from the brand to the audience, via the people that are working on the brand. I think it hits every level of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and actually, to lead on from something that you said there, is something else I wanted to talk about. So there's a really interesting piece actually in the research. It's a great research, by the way, which we'll send to everyone who's signed up, because you really should read it. It's fantastic. Another piece in there about roadblocks and agility, really. So 63% of people who took part in the research said that it's a real challenge to go out to market in a timely manner, was the phrase they used. 62% said it's a real challenge managing brand architecture. 54% said maintaining brand consistency is a big challenge. So these are roadblocks. If you have something really important to say, if you have settled on gold, but then it takes months to get that to a place where it's out there in the world because of, like internal delays, because of managing brand architecture, because of maintaining brand consistency, then you've maybe missed the boat, right? I mean, not everything can take 3 to 6 months to get out there. So what's the solution to alleviating some of those pressures? Maybe, you could kick us off, because I appreciate this is something that is your day-to-day, actually being agile with your messaging.
Yeah, I think, and I guess so many different teams kind of, if we're talking about a milestone, I think obviously if you're talking about those instant ones, like even trends, like this social team can really jump onto those. So they're on the tools, so to speak. But I think even as like a marketing and brand team, we're kind of looking at the holistic view of what's coming. But then there's so many layers to these milestones of what the definition of one is. But I think for us, first of all, as like big brand, we have a lot of responsibility to kind of create that consistency in the guidelines. We're big guidelines guys, so it's kind of just always kind of bringing it back there, because otherwise it just becomes, you lose that distinctiveness and that memorability as a brand. So I think first and foremost, it's like, I think as a brand lead, creating a tool that's very kind of, I guess, quick to kind of absorb and make sure it's not, there is flex, kind of like Dan touched on. It's like there is that, but having that kind of upfront conversation. So if there is a identified milestone that is hypothetically a 2-day turnaround, where's the wriggle room for us? But me kind of being, and our team being quite involved in those conversations. So working hand in hand with the execution team on, if we were going to act on it, how far can we push the brand? I think that's first and foremost. And then even that example I touched on earlier, I think of those teams. We do this at DAZN, but other teams I've worked with historically and heard about is that they'll kind of meet and discuss trends or maybe more fluid milestones that could come up versus your traditional tentpole moments. So it's, I guess, creating a plan there in the room and basically saying, if we're going to go after it, what are our processes? What are we going to do? We want to do this well. So it's kind of creating a few different work streams, really. There's no probably simple answer, I think, but the main probably word is trust. Trust in your guidelines, trust in your team to execute, and then also kind of trust it to take a bit of a risk, but make sure that you're all on the same page in terms of that might not work, but this is what we're willing to do. Otherwise, you know, like Dan and Kieran, you touched on too, you kind of get to that filter at the end, and it's like, this is late, it's stale, it's not cutting through. What's the point?
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you a question there, just on that before Dan, I know that you have some really interesting things to say here, but we've had this really good conversation about the idea that you're building, right? That you're instead of kind of building a road hump, you're climbing a mountain with the brand, right? And that's the aim, and that everything you do takes you to a higher elevation. Is there a post-mortem process in there with each individual piece? You know, do you always wash up after you've let something go out there to help you gain direction? Because I'm just wondering, if you identify these elements that people obviously do, the majority of people do based on the research, presumably you're identifying something really fundamental in your company that needs to change. And so if you see it one time, you're going to carry on seeing it until you analyze what you're doing and change processes, I guess, right?
Yeah, definitely. Dan, do you want to fill that one, or do you want to type in? Yeah, I think 100%. I think if you're doing all these, say if you kind of got a bit of an approach for the year, it's like, okay, we've got our big moments, but also we want to kind of attack a few tactical moments, milestones. You definitely got to have, I guess, a success plan. What metrics are we trying to shift here, being realistic? So having those processes in place, which is always easier said than done as well, because sometimes if you are a fast-paced business, DAZN falls in that kind of bucket, you get caught up with the next wave of what have you kind of rights that come at us. So I think it's giving yourself some space to, but also kind of like we touched on at the get-go, it's if that's your approach, is to be really deliberate. It's like versus doing everything. Let's be selective, be authentic on these ones, and then hopefully that'll give us a bit of breathing space, because we're not doing everything every day to let us to a post wrap up of has that helped us, I guess, shift the brand in a positive way, or whatever metrics you have. So I think having the really following through as a brand lead, as a social kind of lead, to get everyone in a room and say, was that actually, did it do the job we wanted us to? Do we do it again? Being pretty raw and honest there. You know, you want to hit that. I can't remember how you described it, Kieran, but you want to kind of go to the moon there and nail it. But if you're not on that trajectory, do you just be honest and move on? Or basically post analysis is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another sports analogy, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And the old adage of you shoot for the moon, well, you might hit the stars, right? So not everything is going to be. I worked at BuzzFeed for a long time, and BuzzFeed at the time was the zeitgeisty place, and they were trying to figure out how viral traffic worked, right? And the entire process was test and learn. It was experimenting. It was A/B testing. It was, okay, the data said this did well, but if we dial up the number, let's see what happens. And every day, there were all of us who worked there sort of plugging away at the numbers and trying to figure out, how do you make something go viral? And even when we had the formula down pretty pat, it doesn't work every time. Sometimes things hit and sometimes they don't. And were they worth doing? Yes. And are they worth trying again? Absolutely. But every time something happens, every time you put an article out, you want to look at, okay, what was the data saying? Did people drop off? Was it just not opened? Was the thumbnail not engaged enough? You can dial up all these percentages, but you can only do that if you tried in the first place. And so it's absolutely worth having these huge big milestones in your calendar, but then trying a few things in between. And, you know, if you have the setup that allows you a little bit of flexibility, you know, if you orient your team around a central platform that, you know, where all the guidelines are, and, you know, everyone knows how to stay consistent and on brand, everyone feels confident, everyone feels excited, and then you spot an opportunity and you know, because of the way you're set up, you can give it a go, then it's never a failure, because you can look at the data and say, well, yeah, at least we learned something from that, right? And so yeah, that's a big one for me. Like, that, going back to that anxiety piece, that is this the right thing to share? I'm like, more often than not, give it a go, because if it works, you land on the moon, and if not, you learn something.
Right, okay, so this leads us on to something really interesting that I do want to mention. I'm just conscious of the time, but I definitely want to squeeze this in, because this is really important. The phrase I'm going to throw at you both is milestone fatigue, right? Is it real? Can you share too much? How do you stop every little update becoming just another announcement? Because, Dan, I totally take your point, and I think you're saying, you know, you're completely correct there. However, there has to be some guardrails, doesn't there, about what is a milestone and what does not need to get out there, does not need to be in the public's eye. So yeah, firstly, is milestone fatigue real? And secondly, if so, how do you stop every little update becoming another announcement?
Yeah, I mean, milestone fatigue is absolutely real. Posting fatigue, you know, is real. So there is an agreed amount of times that your audience want to hear from you. You know, you're interrupting their lives. You are putting something in a feed where they are to be entertained, where they are to see updates about their sports team or whatever it is. And as a brand, you're interrupting their day. So, you know, with your data should be telling you the amount of times that is the right number of times to post. And within that, then, okay, how many milestones should we be sharing? And when I'm talking about experimenting, I might be saying, okay, you've planned 4 milestones this year, 1 per quarter, roughly. Let's do 3 or 4 experiments this year as well. So, you know, that's 8 posts a year. It's not a great deal. If they, you know, I don't think anyone's going to be fatigued around that. If you are sharing every time you get another 50 followers, you know, that's probably one of the most common milestones I've come across in my life. I worked in social media for a long time. It was often like, can we post about hitting 10,000 followers? It's like, we can, but they don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it's important to us because, you know, we want it. But yeah, it's finding, I think the fatigue comes when it's that kind of message of around, you know, oh God, here they go again. When it's valuable to your audience and to the brand, I think that's where you can avoid fatigue.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think I always kind of was looking at a bit of an analogy, but it's kind of like, you know, if you're following someone on social media and they're kind of constantly posting every day, you lose that impact. I think when someone says something, you know, genuine and it's timely and it's real, you're like, oh, you take notice. So I think we just do that in our daily habits, especially if that's someone you're connected with. As a brand, you have, you know, you're lower down the totem pole. So when you pop your head up above the parapet, you've got to be one kind of genuine, authentic, I guess, you know, trending on what's being discussed, but then also adding value there. Yeah, and I think even, and I touched on it probably when I mentioned earlier, kind of if ideas don't work, I think it's also, and I guess Dan alluded to it, is you kind of, sometimes it might not work, but it takes sometimes a little spark of an idea will take you to build that, I guess, community and I guess customers, how you describe them, for them to kind of be familiar with you. Shouldering up to this milestone might take a bit of time. It's not going to happen overnight unless you absolutely nail it. So I think maybe having a bit of conviction and saying, you know, if we're really going to own this, let's be patient with it and build it and see if we can build a bit of loyalty and awareness around that versus splashing next to a key moment. So I think you've got to sometimes, if you know, back your metrics, whatever that metric is, but sometimes have a bit of trust that this might take a bit of time versus especially smaller brands or what have you. So yeah, it takes a lot of courage, I think, to own those. But if your data backs it up, then lean into it.
Yeah, and I think there is room for different kinds of brands to approach this differently. And it may be that if you're a startup with a very small dedicated, if you funded on Kickstarter and you've got 500 people who bought in, they're going to want to hear every single milestone, right? They're going to want to hear from you 5 times a week because they literally invested, right? Their money is on the line with you. And so that communication piece becomes really important. We sent out the designs to the factory today. We just got our first prototype, whatever that is for you. If you're a startup, again, with a really exciting piece of technology that a lot of people are excited about, maybe they want to hear how the testing went. Maybe they want to hear how the approvals process is going. Whatever it is. If you are a legacy brand that's been around hundreds of years and you make one product, that milestone's probably not going to be the same frequency. It's probably not going to be as exciting, but it doesn't mean there aren't authentic moments that you can, that your audience are interested in hearing about. So yeah, it all comes down to understanding your brand, trusting your audience, understanding what they want, and really knowing your strategy.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really sorry to say that we're out of time. It's felt like we've been talking 5 minutes, but it's been such an engaging conversation, so enlightening. I know I have learned a ton just from listening to both of you. So thank you both so much for your time. To our audience, thanks for watching along. I'm sure that this was super helpful for you too. Just to say that obviously we put this together with our friends at Frontify. If you're interested in learning a bit more, this is the start of a conversation, not the end of it. The details will be below. Make sure you get in touch with Frontify. Fantastic people. As you can tell, Dan is a total content and brand wizard. So, go and make him do some work, right? I'm sure he won't mind at all. And a huge thank you to you, Hugh. Really exciting things are happening at DAZN. I know that. So it's been fantastic to hear about it. It's great to see you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.